Welcome back. Day 2. The only thing that makes today different is we are going to introduce composite figures that include spheres or include hemispheres. So in this case, you have a composite figure, a cone, and a hemisphere. Let's learn how to find the volume and the surface area. So our essential question should look familiar. That's like giving us a weird glare here. Let's try this. Yeah, that's better. Can I find the surface area and volume of a composite figure? This should look like a very familiar essential question because it is something I have asked you quite a few times. The only thing that makes today different is the inclusion of these spheres or hemispheres. We have one example today because it is a little bit more involved. The volume is easier, but the surface area is a little bit more difficult. So we're just going to do one quicker example today. What we are going to draw is this ice cream cone shape where you have a cone on the bottom, a regular upright cone, and then a hemisphere on the top. So the best way to draw this is to start with your hemisphere like that. You could start adding you could do this first. I normally don't, but while I'm at it, I'll do it. And then add the cone on the bottom. Mine doesn't look like a perfect cone, but we're going to pretend it is. Okay, so we do need to get some numbers out of here. The first number you need to have is, that's going to be super hard to see. Let's not use that color. The diameter of the circle is 10 units. And our slant height is 13 units. And that is all I'm giving you. Because you will have to find the height of the cone and all that fun stuff. But I'm not giving you that directly. So let's firstly find the volume of the shape. The volume is always the easiest for the composite figure. Normally I'm like, most people would think it's easiest, but it is the easiest. Because you find the volume. Find the volume, add it up. That's all you are doing. So we need to find the volume of, I think I said this a while ago, I like to use these little diagrams. We're going to find the volume of the hemisphere. I almost tried to say semicircle and hemisphere. Of the hemisphere, and we're going to add it to the cone. And then we're going to that's our answer. You just add them up. So that's how I'm going to kind of visualize it in my head. So we need the hemisphere. I don't have to memorize the volume. The volume is 2/3 pi r cubed. I just got that from our formula sheet, did not memorize it. Same thing with the cone. In fact, I'll just do the cone right now because I have it out. So the volume of a hemisphere is there. The volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. 1/3 pi r squared h. And we're going to plug in what we know. Probably the easiest one, except for I don't know my heights. We're going to have to do a little bit more work. So the volume over here is 2/3 pi 5 cubed. The radius is 5. The diameter is 10, so make sure you're writing that in. And then over here, my radius is still 5, but what is my height? We need to do a little tiny Pythagorean theorem to figure this out. A few of you had emailed me about some previous questions. I think it was with composite figures. But you were like, hey, did you mean to give us the slant height? We actually need the height. And I said, yes, I did mean to give it to you because you need your height. So we don't know what our height is. But we do have this little right triangle. I'm going to use some similar colors because that tends to help. That's 13 and this is 5 because it's half of whatever your diameter is, or it's the radius, and that's my height. That's what I'm going to try and find. I'll just put that off to the side over here. 5 squared plus h squared is equal to 13 squared. X squared, h squared, yeah, whatever. H squared. And x squared, I don't know, I just use that as our variable, is 144, square root both sides, and x is equal to 12. So that's our height is 12. And then you just add them up. Plug that all in your calculator. Get something super fancy and nice. And you get 575.96 units cubed. And that is our volume. So all I did was I typed that in my calculator. In this case, I used the pi button, but please be aware when you're doing these problems, does it ask you to use 3.14? Does it ask you to, round to the nearest hundredth, or does it ask for the nearest tenth? So make sure you're really reading the question. So that's how you find the volume, usually easier. Find the volume, add it up. The surface area is going to be a little bit more difficult. So let's look up the surface area. Now here's the deal. We need to find the surface area of this hemisphere without a bottom, because when I put this together, there's no space in there, right? We don't want like a coverage between them. So I need to find half of the surface area of a sphere, which is really easy. You just take half of it. So we're going to use the surface area of a sphere and just cut it in half. And over here I have my cone, which is the lateral area. Some people prefer to do this. I'm going to even get this out of the way. Okay, so that's hard to see. Now I need blank sheets of paper. Okay, so some people prefer to find the whole surface area, like including the base. Like I'm just going to find it like I normally find it, and then I'm going to subtract a base. And they do the same thing. I'm going to find the whole semicircle or hemisphere and then subtract the base. I personally prefer to find the piece that I'm given and find the piece I'm given and add it up. So whichever way you choose to go about it, that's totally fine. In fact, if you like to use the subtraction one or the subtraction problem where you can like find it and subtract it and find it and subtract it, feel free to do that and just check back in here to see if you got the right answer. So our surface area, we have a hemisphere. And I only want the top part of the hemisphere. I only want like literally half the sphere. And then in this case, I just want the lateral area of this open cone. So I'm going to kind of piece it together. So let's look at our two equations for a sphere and a hemisphere for the surface area. Well, a sphere is 4 pi r squared. That would be the whole sphere. And a hemisphere is 3. The reason it's not 2 is because this part is 2 and this part is 1. So it adds up to be 3 pi r squared. But this is only 2 pi r squared because it's half the surface area of a sphere. So half of 4 pi r squared is 2 pi r squared. And then the other thing we need to know is a cone. Now let's look at the surface area of a cone. The surface area is pi RL, and even over here we know that pi r slant height or pi RL is the lateral area, which is exactly what we want. So that's what we're writing down. But when we look at the surface area formula, you should notice that the surface area for a cone is pi RL plus pi r squared, and that's this piece, right? What's the area of a circle? Pi r squared. So if we don't want the base, we're just going to subtract that pi r squared, and we're left with pi RL, or pi r slant height. And this one actually ends up being a little bit easier in terms of math. We're given our radius. What's our radius? Looking back up here, our radius is 5, and we're given the slant height. It's 13. You're just plugging in. The reason why this could be a little bit more difficult is because you're trying to figure out what is the surface area. Do I have bases? Do I not? So in this case, the surface area for my hemisphere, or for that half circle, it's not a full hemisphere technically, an empty hemisphere, is 2 pi radius squared. And over here, the lateral area, or just that base part of the cone, or I'm sorry, the cone without the base, subtracting the base, is pi r, which is 5, L, which is slant height, 13. Just gonna add it up at this point. So I have my surface area of all these pieces. This is 50 pi. This is 65 pi. And when I plug this all into my calculator, for example, my exact answer is going to be 115 pi. Whereas my rounded answer, when I use the pi button in this case, that's 361.28 units squared. Now that's using the pi button. That's not me using 3.14. So if it asks you to use 3.14, make sure you're doing that.